But since we pump hydrogen ions out of the matrix is more basic than this space was. And so that tends to deprotonate when it gets into the matrix, which tends to then carry a hydrogen ion into the matrix. What's that going to do to our ability to make ATP?
Decrease.
Yeah. We call compounds like this uncouplers. Right? We established in an experiment like this. Right? We established in an experiment like this one that we need to have an intact membrane so that the formation of ATP is coupled to the formation of the gradient. So anything that lets hydrogen ions get back through the membrane without having to go through the ATP synthase, we call those things uncouplers. Right? So, we can uncouple NADH oxidation and ATP synthesis if we've got a disturbed membrane. Right? We talked about that. We can also intentionally uncouple those two by adding the appropriate compound, 2,4-dinitrophenol being one of them. Okay? So we get these uncoupled.
Is there a reason to do that?
Is there a reason to do that? Well, they thought this was, this was discovered really as a way to study this, right? When they were still trying to figure out what all these parts were doing, they discovered these compounds. But somebody had a great idea, right? And often great ideas have to do with helping people lose weight without having to really do anything to lose weight, right? So someone's great idea was, hey, if we take people who need to lose weight and we give them this, well, what will happen? They will use NADH. They will use NADH to pump hydrogen ions. Even if they're not moving around, those hydrogen ions can get back into the mitochondria. And since it's really the backup of the electron transport chain that controls whether NADH is oxidized, if we let the hydrogen ions back in, then hydrogen ions can be pumped out again, and we can just use NADH to pump hydrogen ions without ever having to make ATP because these people are sitting around and not doing anything, right? Doesn't that sound like a great plan? So they gave people who felt like they needed to lose weight 2,4-dinitrophenol, right, to uncouple their ATP synthesis from their burning of NADH. So since they can constantly oxidize NADH, where do you get most of your NADH?
Citric acid cycle.
Citric acid cycle, and one of the primary fatty acids. So that would put them in constant fatty acid burning mode, right? They should just be able to sit around and lose weight, right? It is too good to be true. Where was the flaw in their plan? What tissue is really dependent on oxidative metabolism in the mitochondria? There are really two that depend a lot on oxidative metabolism in the mitochondria. One is what we always guess.
The liver.
The liver, right? Remember, right, my whole story about walking up the stairs. Your liver uses fatty acids to make its ATP. So one problem is you're kind of stressing the liver's energy metabolism. So long term, probably that's not a good idea, right? But what's the other sort of important organ that's really dependent on oxidative metabolism, especially fatty acid metabolism?
Kidneys?
Yeah, kidneys is the little cousin of the liver, but you know, we'll sort of give it that. What else? Your heart. Yeah. Your heart kind of likes to use oxidative metabolism. Is that an organ that you want to disrupt its energy metabolism? Especially, now, imagine this process. As long as these overweight people were sedentary, right, things were okay. Eventually we were going to poison their liver, but we hadn't told them that yet. Right? Yeah, small problem. But what happens when these people lose weight?
Then they want to do stuff.
Then they want to do stuff. And then as soon as their heart starts trying to beat hard when they're doing stuff, what happens? It's not making ATP. Do we notice a small flaw in this plan? So it worked really well. They lost weight quickly, right up until they dropped dead.
Oh.
Yeah. Because their hearts just stopped.
Okay, I have a question. We can walk through all this and realize all of the stuff that sounds bad, but why couldn't they?
Because somebody was worried more about making money than they were about what? Really thinking their way through. Yeah, hence now why we go through and like test stuff.
For like 10 years.
Yeah. So, right, we can uncouple this, but there are times when uncoupling is preferable. Now okay, here we go. Ready?
Aww, it's a little baby squirrel.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a ground squirrel.
It's all curled up.
Yeah, a cute little ground squirrel, right? Ground squirrels hibernate over the winter. Yeah, ground squirrels do, right? So they hibernate. Bears hibernate as well. And so one of the things they have to do when they're hibernating is they have to maintain their body temperatures. But they're kind of passive there, right? They're not particularly active. So they're not using a ton of ATP, but they need to use metabolism to maintain their body temperatures. So they actually have a protein in their mitochondrial inner membranes that's called thermogenin, which is really just a gated proton channel. It's an uncoupler, right? So, and this occurs specifically in the mitochondria of a particular type of adipose tissue called brown fat, right? Brown adipose tissue. So the brown adipose tissue has a large number of mitochondria. Mitochondria have a lot of iron-containing proteins. So mitochondria, if you isolate them, have a reddish-brown color. And so you have these adipose cells that have a lot of these mitochondria, and they give the whole mitochondrion a reddish, or the whole adipose cell and the tissues that are made from it a reddish-brown color, right? So they've got this, right, this thermogenin that will let hydrogen ions come back in the same way that a chemical uncoupler would. And so what they're able to do is, right, eat a lot of nuts and berries at the end of the season, gain weight, right, get fat at the end of the summer, oxidize those fatty acids in these mitochondria in this brown fatty tissue, right? What do we say happens to the NADH? Some of the energy is lost as heat. Also, when the hydrogen ions come back in, have you ever diluted an acid solution? Those of you who work in the prep lab, if you dilute acid, what happens? It gets warm. So the hydrogen ions moving from high concentration to low concentration, that generates heat as well. And so, right, some of the heat lost from the reaction of NADH, the passage of these processes, plus heat generated when hydrogen ions move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration, that generates just enough heat to keep the little squirrel warm enough to not freeze into a little squirrel sickle, right, over the winter.
Even when it's really, really cold, like super cold.
Even most of the time, I mean, if they've constructed their burrows properly, yeah, they live just fine. Now, in humans, where does this same process act? Where?
Babies.
Babies. Yeah, babies have brown fat on their back, right? And so, this is how babies stay warm because they can't shiver yet, right? Babies can't shiver.
I didn't know that.
And so, to stay warm, they have a layer of brown fat, which both provides insulation and provides this kind of thermogenesis as a way of maintaining their body temperatures, at least within some range.
So babies are hot.
That's why babies are hot. Okay? So, I think I'm done with electron transport. There might be some details. Now, we had a debate. You can shut it off if you want.